People ask me all the time how they can find a good trauma therapist. And all I can tell them is, I don't actually know. So many people who went through trauma when they were kids are still waiting to find real help for the trauma-related problems that are still happening in their lives. And this is not just a tragedy, but it's an injustice. Are you one of the people? Couldn't find help? I was. I didn't know anything else I could do back then about the intense struggles I was having that I now know were from dysregulation and some other symptoms stemming from trauma in my childhood. I mean, how do you really know who to talk to or what results are reasonable to expect? You hear people say all the time, oh, you should go to therapy. You should talk to someone. It's so awesome. Totally changed my life. And you think, I want to find something like that, but where? Should I just go on Yelp? Do I Google it? How do you know who to pick? Because it usually ends up being random. So then you go and you find that you just feel sad or awkward or like it's just not going anywhere. You got to watch out then, because you end up internalizing two negative ideas. One, that therapy doesn't work at all, which is not the case. And two, that you must just be too broken to benefit from the thing that other people seem to think is so great. And that's probably not right either. I don't think you're too broken to heal, but I think it can be very hard to get matched with someone who really understands you and really understands trauma and has an approach to healing that actually gets in there and makes a difference for you and doesn't leave you feeling like you're an alien or a failure or a bull in a china shop. So how do I know this feeling? Because I've lived it. One of the reasons I set out to learn about how to heal from childhood PTSD is because I'm one of those people who totally hit a wall when I was trying to get help the conventional way. Now, back then, when very little was known about the effects of early trauma, no one was connecting the, random symptoms, they seemed random, that I had with trauma. But it turns out my problems were not random. They were common and normal for someone who grew up with abuse and neglect. I couldn't get help from professionals at the time. And if you've taken any of my courses and heard my story, I was lucky enough to figure out an approach that did work for me. But that was after 11 different therapists. So therapy still, by and large, is how our culture supports people who are struggling. It's what insurance covers, if it covers anything, and it can be hard to get an appointment. It can be expensive. It can be hard to get geographically, and when you do get in, it's, this huge investment to see somebody who you basically know nothing about. And the people who know how to help with CPTSD, they're out there, but the problem is, can they help you? And will you be able to tell this in an initial meeting? So in this video, I want to talk about the qualities that make a good therapist for people with CPTSD, and these are characteristics to look for and questions that you can ask when you're testing out the waters with a new therapist. Now, as it happens, there's an explosion of therapy available online. And there's an explosion of a lot of things online that used to be done face-to-face. But one place that you can go for online therapy is BetterHelp. You've probably seen their ads on TV, which I think are really powerful and accurate. And I've got a link to BetterHelp down below in the description section if you want to check them out as a resource for online therapy. I've had a partnership agreement with them for a couple years, and lots of people from this channel have ended up finding help there. Not everybody finds their perfect match, but I'm going to tell you what you can do to fix that so that you can really hone in and find out if a therapy, whether it's through BetterHelp or anywhere, whether it's right for you. So it's true that something is lost without the face-to-face connection, but what's gained by going online for help is the cost comes down a lot. It's a lot easier to set up an initial meeting than when you had to go in person. And most of all, you have access to so many people out there. They don't have to be in your town. They don't even have to be in your continent anymore. So you have a better chance of finding a trauma-informed therapist who fits you and gets you. Now, also, thanks to the internet, there's a lot of transparency now around clinical professionals. And in many cases, you can get online and learn about them through reviews for, their own bio, but you can also find what other of their clients have said about them before actually reaching out. And that's a big step forward for you. Obviously, what people say about other people on the internet isn't 100% reliable, but it's a lot better than the just like black wall that we've generally had around therapists. There was no way to find out, what their track record was. But when you do meet with a therapist, you still have to ask the right questions, all right? So if you have CPTSD and you want to go the therapy route, I'm going to really encourage you to find someone who can help you with that, the trauma part of it. Someone who doesn't minimize or misunderstand CPTSD, but who gets it. And so I want to equip you with the list of things to look for to help you narrow down your choices and find someone who just might hold the key for you to take a very big step in your healing. So here are 10 things to look for when choosing a therapist. Number 1 is they project honesty and confidence rather than people-pleasing or vagueness when you ask specific questions about their approach. And some therapists, just like some people, will have a sincere desire to help anyone who asks. And maybe this will be because of financial reasons, or maybe they're new in their career and haven't yet figured out what they do best. But the therapist you want isn't afraid to say, you know what, this part is my specialty, but this other thing you're asking about is not. Or you want somebody who can say, trauma isn't something I'm trained in, but I will look into it. So someone willing to learn about a new thing is better than somebody who already thinks they know everything and then just sort of like throws it at you and it doesn't feel right. So when you do find a right person, they may very well know a whole lot of stuff, and you will that's how they will present themselves. I know a whole bunch about trauma, and you'll give it a try with them and it will feel like, yes, this is a fit. But if it's not, that's what I'm saying. There needs to be open-mindedness. And no matter what they've learned about trauma, your case is unique. Your case is you. And they need to be open-minded about what you're telling them. Now, there are very few checks and balances to keep therapists from making claims that they know everything already. And hardly anyone knows everything. Hardly anyone knows about trauma, really. It's a very emerging, it's a new thing. It's a new understanding that's coming out. And it's really changing everything. So not everybody has caught up. So watch out for that certainty about what trauma is and what you're supposed to do, unless they can be specific about what they mean and it fits what you're looking for. All right, the second thing to look for, you want them to be up to date on research outside their traditional therapy circles. Ask what their sources are for new information on trauma. If they mention ACEs, Bessel van der Kolk, Pete Walker, those are some sort of major, well-accepted resources for how to understand this. There's a lot of newer stuff. There's stuff outside of that. But just for example, if you read about trauma, you can look for people who have some sort of knowledge about the authors and the principles and the approaches to treatment that have resonated with you so far. You get to ask for that. So look for signs that they're paying attention to the thought leadership that's popular. Now, you may have certain modalities you want to ask about: tapping, somatic experiencing, nervous system healing. Whatever it is, ask. Get a feel if they know about the technique that's been helpful to you and what they have to say about it. It's fashionable these days to call everything trauma-informed. But remember, this means completely different things to different people. It's not clearly defined. It doesn't necessarily mean anything in terms of whether whatever they're offering is going to help you. And anyway, no matter how closely aligned with someone you are philosophically, the fact is the person who is going to have to step in and decide if this is a fit is you. So the third thing to learn about a prospective therapist is their knowledge from professional education, personal experience, or some of both. This is a personal question, but if it's important to you, and it is an important thing for many people in the crappy childhood fairy community, you can ask if they had their own experiences of trauma, and you can ask what they found helpful for their own healing. Now, when you're discussing this with them, try to be open to hearing with both your head and your heart, if you know what I mean. Get a feel for whether you agree with them intellectually, but also if you feel affinity with them. They don't have to be just like you, but a lot of us here, not everyone, but many of us feel extra comfortable with people who have experienced CPTSD and come out on the other side. All right? The fourth thing that you will want to ask is how long they think it will take until you start feeling better. Now, I know this isn't a fair question because no one knows the answer for any one person. But if all they have for you is platitudes about every person being different or healing is a long journey, they may not be the one for you. So you want to look for people who can address not just long-term healing, but the immediate need that everyone seeking therapy has to get some relief from symptoms. And I don't just mean from medication. There are many techniques for calming and self-soothing and self-regulating that, if you ask me, should always be part of treatment. Those are the things I teach, and I encourage you to find someone who understands this and supports it. The fifth thing is look for common sense in their approach. Do they suggest basic things known to help with trauma, like exercise and limiting alcohol and sugar and getting your sleep? Or is everything they suggest something a professional has to give you? Is it abstract? Is it intellectual? Adding in common sense strategies for self-healing is just plain smart. And you want someone who makes it part of their recommendations. The sixth thing to learn about them is, will they encourage you to focus on your role in the problems and how to solve them, or will they be more interested in the ways that other people have hurt you? There are plenty of people out there who want to talk about the hurts and therapists who are willing to listen. But my opinion is this needs to be kept as just part of any approach, not the whole thing. Without a focus on things that you can actually change, talking about the hurts is just a way to delay or avoid the hard work of facing the breadth of the problem. And this is what number 7 is about. Do they have ways of working with you that don't always require you to tell your trauma stories? This is really important because if you're like me, talking about your traumatic memories can be severely dysregulating to the point of ruining any, potential benefit of therapy. So look for people who can suggest ways of working on things that are not all about talking, especially being careful to let the talk about trauma and the past and other people. You don't want to let that take over the whole hour. They need to have something more specific other than that, is what I'm saying. Okay. The 7th thing is, can they keep a visit fairly structured? Do they go along with whatever you plan to talk about or happen to bring up? Or do they have a path to help you follow? That can be so important. For dysregulated people, it's really helpful to when, your mind is just kind of like, it's like traveling and tumbling like a waterfall through memories and associations, to have somebody say, okay, now we're going to do this, and help you, get something out of each session. Very good. Number 8, are they tuned in and knowledgeable enough to notice when you're dysregulated? And do they have techniques to pause and help you come back from that so that therapy can continue in a productive way? Right. Number 9, are they able to see you beyond any labels or diagnoses that you have in order to really see your unique interests, your strengths, your vulnerabilities? Number 10 is, are they curious? Are they respectful rather than invalidating or dismissive about your opinions and ideas about what's wrong, what you need, what approaches seem useful? You may have learned to tolerate this kind of thought domination in the past, but for your healing, you will want freedom to decide for yourself what is important in your healing, what belongs in it. Now, sometimes things get so hard in life that the most important thing about a therapist is that they can help you right now. They can just come swoop in and just tell you what to do. There's a time and a place for that. But in the longer term, it's a partnership, isn't it? Where they're providing some structure and they're believing you and they're helping you find your answers about the problems that you present. So this is why I always keep the link to BetterHelp, the online therapy service, down in the description section. When you're in crisis, when you feel like you're drowning in grief or hopeless or frantic, when you feel like things are falling apart so fast you don't know how to stop it, there's one sure way to get help. You can try that link. My team is here offering free tools, paid courses, coaching that you can access anytime too, for learning our approach to trauma healing and strengthening, your knowledge, your perception, to help you get free from old patterns and start rebuilding your life. We're good with that. But for a crisis, when you're, maybe in danger, we want you to have access to professionals. We want you to feel in charge of your healing. So you hear me say this a lot. You have a right to be sovereign over your own process of healing. Don't toss it to chance. just blaming the system or doing whatever you're told, but talking to people and seeking out forms of help and learning by trial and error sometimes, to learn how you tick, to try what you think might be helpful and get an experience of that before you decide yes or no if you're going with it. So if you're interested in this topic about what treatments out there, how they measure up against each other, for which ones are more effective, which ones not so much, I've got a video for you about that right here, and I will see you very soon.